Okay, we're continuing in Sefer Shoftim. We're still in the first part. We're discussing why there's a repetition of a story that was in Yehoshua regarding the capturing of the city of Dvir that was also called Kiryas Sefer, and how it was discussed, how Kalev captured it, and it's being repeated, and the concept of he could not capture it, rather, and he gave it to someone who could capture it, which was Osniel ben Kenaz, and he gave his daughter to Osniel ben Kenaz. That whole discussion we talked about last week, and we went through the Malbim that discusses that there were two wars actually involved. There was the Milchamta Shel Torah, the war of Torah, that was involved, and evidently Osniel ben Kenaz set up a yeshiva in Kiryas Sefer, and there was the physical war that actually happened as well. So now I want to go through a little bit of a piece. We did it last time too, but it's such an important piece, it's worthwhile repeating it. So if you want to give this out for those who want to follow, it's in Rashi script, so you can look along with me, or you can just listen. Very important piece from the Arvei Nachal in Parsha Shalach. We're going to start at the very bottom line of the first column. You can follow along with me as I read it. Okay. And this is what he explains. He adds a very important point over here. He says, Hinei Shamati, we're going to the top of the left column. Heard from a scholar who explained the verses of Yeshua and Shoftim, Shomer Kalev, Bevo El Devir, when it says that Kalev came to the city of Devir, V'shem Devir Lifnim Kiryas Sefer, and the name of the city of Dvir was Kiryas Sefer. Yomer Kalev, and Kalev says, just reading over the psukim now, Asher Yakes Kiryas Sefer Lakada, V'nasati Los Achsa Biti Liisha. Whoever can capture the city of Kiryas Sefer and conquer it, can hit it and conquer it, I will give my daughter Achsa for a wife. V'yilkad Osniel ben Kenaz, etc. And Osniel ben Kenaz captured it. So he says, V'kasha, he asks the following. Why was it in every city they went, that wasn't hard to conquer? And we see, for example, Kalev just captured the city of Hebron, which had the giants. So certainly, he's quite capable, from a military point of view, to conquer places. There's nothing to suggest that Devir was a more difficult place to conquer. Udvir hayakovid lahem, and Dvir was so hard for them. Until Kalev was forced to say, Asher Yaakov, whoever can hit the city of Dvir, I will give him my daughter for a wife. What was so difficult about Dvir? Question number one. Question number two, V'su, V'shem Dvir lifnim Kiryas Sefer, ma'inaf gemina. The fact that Dvir had an earlier name of Kiryas Sefer, what does it matter to us what it used to be called? Eich Shma, what its name was. Hayim, it's in the beginning. Third question, V'su, and also Asher Yakes Kiryas Sefer, Havalei Lameimar, Asher Yakes Dvir. He says, whoever will hit Kiryat Sefer will get my daughter. He should have said, he who hits Devir will get my daughter, because it was called Kiryat Sefer before, not now. In other words, they came to a place called Dvir. Okay? Dvir used to be called Kiryat Sefer. So what's Kalev supposed to say? He who will hit Kiryat Sefer, or he who will hit Dvir? Should say he who will hit Devir, because it's called Devir now, not Kiryat Sefer. So those are the three questions he's asking. Number one, was it so difficult to conquer it? Number two, why is he using a different name for it? Right? Number three, what do I care what it was called earlier? Okay. So then you could skip about 6 lines as brackets. 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines. And then one more question. V'su asher yaka ulakata kafalashon is a double expression. He who hits, yakeh, he who hits, ulakata, he conquers. It's a double expression. Just say, he who hits it. He who conquers it. So that's the 4 questions. So now he answers. For Azal and our rabbis of blessed memory, Omru, Kiryat Sefer, what is Kiryat Sefer? Elu shin halacha shinishtachu b'mei avela shel Moshe. These are the 300 or 3,000 different versions, laws that were forgotten during the mourning period for Moshe Rabbeinu. V'chzira Osniel mipilpulo. And Osniel was able to bring it back with his pilpul. Pilpul means as we said on Thursday, his ability to compare and contrast one piece of Talmud to another and build structures of understanding and able to bring back the laws. So that's what the rabbis say from this repetition, as we learned in the Malbim on Thursday. V'zeh Tamu Yoser, this is even more amazing. The rabbis are taking the verses out of their simple meaning. You're reading simple military verses, and it's telling us, well, you know what we're talking about over here? There were laws that were forgotten, and Osniel ben Kenaz brought them back. That's not what the Psukim are saying. So where's this coming from? So the Malbim ready to explain, because it's a repetition. Since the story is mentioned twice, it has to be teaching us something. But here the Rabbi Nachal lays down a critical foundation. The next 5 lines, and I have them underlined. There's an extra copy over there. And he says a very important thing. This is the idea. The fact was the Jewish people were able to conquer the land of Israel in an abnormal way. It was incredibly miraculous how they conquered Eretz Yisrael. This was not a trained army, the Jewish people, and they really defeated extremely strong armies. So it was beyond the natural way to do this. How were they able to do that? Hainu lafi shahatorah hi defus ha'olam. Because the Torah is the tfus, is like the imprint of the world. U'b'Torah nivra olam. The world was created through Torah. Everything revolves around the Torah. The Torah was the blueprint for creation. God had a Torah, and from those words of the Torah, that was the blueprint from which He created the world. The Eretz Yisrael, who aduk b'Torah, and the land of Eretz Yisrael is completely bound up with Torah. And every parcel of land in Eretz Yisrael, chiyusuhu mechelek Torah hamisyaches elah. The life beat of every inch of Eretz Yisrael depends solely on its relationship to the Torah that it parallels. That is the connection of Eretz Yisrael. Its reality is connected to Torah. V'kasher kibul Yisrael HaTorah, once the Jewish people accepted the Torah at Sinai, v'kimu, and established it and were keeping it, nimtza kol chiyas Eretz Yisrael hoya biyodam, and then it came out, the entire life beat of Israel, the land of Israel, was in their hands. They had the real deed to the land. The real deed to the land are the words of the Torah. And every piece of land corresponds to another law or verse of the Torah. That's what it, so you want to own the land of Eretz Yisrael, you have to own the Torah that compares to it. The land of Israel is more unique than any piece of land in the world. So once they had that, so they're able to conquer it without any difficulty. There's no problem. The root source power of being able to live in any part of Eretz Yisrael depends solely on the Torah that we have and that we keep. This is the unusual relationship that exists. The land of Eretz Yisrael is our home, is our the place that Hashem has designated for us. The only reason we're entitled to it is because we are His people. The only thing that makes us His people is our fulfillment of His Torah. And had we not accepted to fulfill His Torah, we would not be His people. And therefore God gives his people what they need. And what they need is a place to live in Eretz Yisrael. So one is dependent. This does not work in a normal way. You can't go into the land transfer office in Newmarket and say, I'd like a piece of land on Spring Gate because I know a few Mishnayos. They'll throw you out. But in Eretz Yisrael, this is precisely how it works. Precisely how it works. So therefore, they go into Eretz Yisrael, no problems. Everything's miraculous. It's theirs. It's just theirs for the taking. V'hinei noda, you know, ki shem kol davar hu achiyas v'apnimi shalosa davar. The name of anything is the life beat and the innermost reality of anything that exists, as we learned in last week's parsha. Ki nefesh chaya hu shemo. The living soul is its name. When Adam named all the animals, it says whatever he named them, that's what their name was. Which the obvious question we discussed in the Parsha class was, what does that mean? Of course, whatever he named it, it was. But the answer is what? Whatever. Adam was so smart, and he used Lashon HaKodesh, the Hebrew language, to define what every animal's reality was. This was the great insight in his naming the animals. When he named an animal, it wasn't just, he named it A, B, and C. It was what the essence of the animal was. That's what Adam was able to penetrate and give it its name. And therefore that applies to everything. And that applies to every single city in Eretz Yisrael. Its name reflects certain essence that it has. And this is what the verse was teaching us. When they came to the people who dwelled in the city of Devir, and now the Navi says, V'shem Devir lifnim, and the name of the city of Devir beforehand. Why is it emphasized this? Daika Ratzaloimer, it said Shem Shel Devir. It didn't say, and it was called Devir before, but the name of the city was called Devir. Meaning to say, what's the essence of the city? It says, Achiyus v'apnimi shalo hu Kiryas Sefer. The essence and its life is what? Is Kiryas Sefer, which literally means the town of the book. The city of the book. So now the rabbis understood. These are the Shin Halacha Shinshtachu B'mei Avela Shel Moshe. These were the hundreds of laws that were forgotten during the mourning period when Moshe died. This was the particular life beat of this particular city. There had to be something that would be lost. There had to be a piece of land that would be lost compared to the laws that were lost. It can't be that a law is lost without it having any ramifications. You forgot 300 laws of Jewish law? That means a piece of land is lost in Eretz Yisrael. Finished. You have no right to it anymore. So Mamela, so consequently, Beshigiyam Lasham, when they got to that place, Toshash Kocham, their strength got weakened. They couldn't conquer it because they didn't have the life strength of that area of Eretz Yisrael. So Kalev comes in and says, I can't take it. So Kalev says, Asher Yake es Kiryas Sefer, he who will hit Kiryas Sefer, will defeat it. Dahainu means to say, Sheyachzer halachos mipilpulo. He will bring back the laws with his great Talmudic wisdom. So so one of the questions was, why the double expression? Why to say, he will hit the city, right? I will give my daughter. He says, Asher Yake es Kiryas Sefer, and then Ulekodah, and then we'll conquer it, and we'll capture it. So what's the double expression? So now it's very clear now. He will hit the city means you will get the laws back. Umemela, and consequently, then when you go in, Ulekodah, the next word is Lekodah, you'll capture the city. Afterwards. V'nasati lo, then I'll give you my daughter. And that's what it says. Ulekodah Osnil. And Osnil was able to capture it. As our rabbis say, Shechsir Mipulpul, he brought it back with his pilpul in Torah. And then he was able to conquer that place itself. Wow. It's like an incredible, incredible concept. Incredible concept. And that's why you saw throughout Sefer Shoftim when we learned it, there was always some connection. Always Hashem was bugging them. Keep learning, keep learning, keep learning. You can't stop learning. And we find that the night before Yeshua had a certain battle, he spent the whole night learning Torah. What's all this Torah learning doing? Because without the Torah learning, we have no right to any piece of Eretz Yisrael. So now I'm sure we can appreciate the challenges, the contemporary challenges we have in the state of Israel, where there are competing forces that exist within the state. You have the secular state that feels that Torah is has nothing to do with the state, and the pure secularists are anti-Torah, would not want to see any Torah in the state. And then you have the religious Zionists and the religious groups there that feel Torah is everything in the state, right? And you can see that the biggest problem, the Arabs, is not the problem at all. The Arabs are just the props. They're just the props. The real issue is how much Torah is being learned in Eretz Yisrael. That's the only reason Hashem wants us in Eretz Yisrael. It's not Torah learning and, of course, mitzvah fulfillment. It's not just Torah learning. If you don't fulfill the mitzvahs, then the Torah learning isn't worth very much. But it's both that's going on over there. And, so therefore any person who has gone through Navi understands that, whatever miracles happened in the past had nothing to do with the tremendous Israeli army, because there were just too many miracles. As we told you many stories in the past. We told you the famous story with the Jew who went to West Point. It's a true story. Who became an observant Jew after the following incident he had with one of his generals who was teaching in West Point. They had a class that was on great military strategies in great military wars, and at the end of the entire course, there was a Jewish student who was not religious. So he raised his hand and said, "Excuse me, sir, permission to speak, to ask a question?" He says, "Yes." He says, "I don't understand. You went through every major war in history, and you didn't mention any one of the Jewish wars, 1948, 1967, 1973. Why did you not mention any of these wars?" So the general says, "Soldier, I'll see you after class." So then after class, he goes into the general's office, and the general, I think it's like one of these, he's a Christian Baptist, one of these chevra, not Jewish, and he says, "Come on in." So close the door. He says, "You should know that your question has been discussed in the highest circles at West Point. And all the generals have come to one conclusion, that these wars were only won by a miraculous nature. And there's some aspect of Jewish wars that's beyond anything that we can describe in a military battlefield. And therefore those wars are of no benefit for anyone who wants to learn military strategy. As one of the generals mentioned, he said, seems to be that God is fighting their wars. You're dismissed." And then when that kid heard that, he put his kippah on. He said, "If I have to hear from a Southern Baptist that God is fighting the Jewish people's wars, then I must not know what my religion's all about yet." Right? So in West Point, they understand that there's nothing to learn from these wars. It's incredible how the ones who are winning those wars don't see it themselves. It's incredible that when we went, I think it was in 2003, when we went to one of our missions to visit the different infantries. I believe it was the Golani Brigade, if I'm not mistaken. So we were up north, and they were describing some of the battles in the Yom Kippur War. And one of these young officers, 21, 22 years old, was discussing, the battle in the Valley of Tears, where like a handful of tanks were able to hold off, so many more tanks, and the Arab tanks had night vision, and they didn't have night vision. And we were talking about, battles that were at point blank range. Cannons usually don't miss at point blank range. I mean, like you're like 50 yards away, you don't miss. If you're hundreds and hundreds of yards away, you could miss. You don't miss that close. And they're discussing how the Israeli soldiers were so brave and courageous, which they certainly are, no question about it. So then one of the people on our trip said, I don't understand. We've been discussing this for like a half an hour. Don't you at all see any hand of God in any of this? So the guy says, our policy when we discuss military is not to involve God in any of these things. So it gets very scary when West Point can talk about God, about the Israeli wars, and the Israeli officers do not. It's extremely scary. It's extremely scary. And that's a great battle that's going on, the biggest battle. And you should know, a lot of people, but slowly, the Haredim, I won't say the Haredim, the religious Zionists are infiltrating the military, Baruch Hashem. Slowly, there's Rabbi Yedidya Atlas, who we met on one of the trips. He's a frum guy. Slowly, in a very discreet way, they're bringing, because there's a lot more religious soldiers now.
Actually, more and more religious officers.
There's more religious officers than non-religious officers in the army now. So there's certain religious groups are insisting there should be some education. They do it like with all apparent motives, but it's not the real motive, not the ulterior motive. They say, listen, you got a lot of religious soldiers. You got to teach your officers what the needs of a religious soldier are. And you can't know that unless you learn a little bit of their Torah. You have to know their cultural differences. So now they have courses where every secular officer has to take a course in Torah to be able to relate to the religious soldiers. And slowly they're trying to carve all the officers. So they are in that's the real battle that's going on over there, to get them to appreciate what's going on. So we have to realize that the most important battles to be fought in Eretz Yisrael are not on the battlefields, but rather they're in the political arenas in terms of how Torah is going to be learned. Now, you have to know, on the other hand, there has never been so much Torah learned in Eretz Yisrael since the times of the second Beis Hamikdash, which is a good thing too. And that obviously is what's making things happen, and why the wars are being won. And that's how a religious Jew has to look at that, and how these institutions need to be supported, much more, than the government per se. Because once you learn this, you realize if Torah, you have to realize the secular leaders totally would want every yeshiva closed. Would want every yeshiva closed, and they always do things to their best to try to not allow yeshivas to be built, but instead, secular universities and universities for Arabs can be built very easily, but the fundings for religious schools are, not as forthcoming. So there's a great war that's going on, and we have to daven to Hashem that the right war is won, so that all the other wars should be won. Yes?
So the point is, sounds like the suggestion here that they have to learn Torah before they could conquer the land.
Of course, that's what they spent for. This good point you're saying, Rafal. They spent 40 years in training in the desert. What were they doing for 40 years? You'd figure for 40 years they trained them to be good soldiers, right? No, they trained them to be scholars.
But those people didn't.
They didn't, but their children. But it became part. They built an infrastructure. What was the infrastructure? They could have built an infrastructure, a military infrastructure. They didn't build that at all. They built what? They built a Torah infrastructure. So that's how that was able to happen. I mean, anybody who looks in the 1948 war, there was one Piper Cub plane. That was it. That was the whole Israeli Air Force.
But that's my point, though, because in 48, particularly in 56, probably even 67, Torah was at its lowest. It had been destroyed in the Holocaust. I mean, now, Baruch Hashem, it's much better, but at that point in time, so many of the yeshivas had been destroyed, so many of the Talmidei Chachamim, there was so little Torah, there was nothing in North America, and Europe had been completely destroyed. And so there was no Torah to establish, to rely on, to reestablish the Jews in Eretz Yisrael.
That's a great question. So that I'm going to give you a great answer. When is Torah learning? Let's look at it like this. What is the most powerful time of the day, the 24-hour period of the day, What is mystically known as the most powerful time where we can get the most mercy from God? The morning? No. When do we say Slichas? In Elul. The first day of Slichas, the most optimal time to say Slichas. It's after Chatzos. Right at Chatzos. Chatzos, midnight. Halachic midnight. We say Tikkun Chatzos for the destruction of Beis HaMikdash. What makes that so special? Why is it such a special time? The answer is we're now in the deepest part of the night. The deepest part of the night. And now, Chatzos, what does Chatzos represent? The turning point from the deepest part of the night. In other words, when you're in the darkest point, the hardest thing to do is to be able to start to bring some light. In other words, there are spiritual energies coming into the world at Chatzos Halayla, because as night, you know, is a very not spiritual time. It's anti-spiritual. All the forces of evil are out there. And it gets stronger and stronger as the night progresses. When does it begin to get weakened? Right at Chatzos, because that's the tipping point where now it's in the universe, it begins to shift, and it's beginning to bring us to the point of light. Beginning to bring us to the point of light. Then when do you experience it? It's most at sunrise. But there's no sunrise without Chatzos. So there's a very, very great power to midnight. So now, when I think about this, now you sit back and we look, it's really the 70th anniversary of the beginning of the Holocaust. We sit back 70 years afterwards and we see this Torah all over the place, right? Where did that come from? Where did it come from? It came from the handful of courageous Rosh Yeshivas and Rebbes who, after they saw everything was destroyed, they said, we're not giving up, we're starting again. Where you know, what was the story? I believe it was with Rabbi Meir Bloch, the Rosh Yeshiva in Tels. It's one example of many. Him and Rav Mantel Katz, they were in the city of Tels. The Rosh Yeshiva was in the city of Tels in Lithuania. The city was destroyed. Everything was destroyed. Yeshiva was destroyed. The two of them happened to be in America for a fundraising mission. When the war came, they couldn't come back. They weren't able to get back in time. They couldn't. So they rebuilt Torah in Cleveland, Ohio. And why did they go to Cleveland, Ohio? What's so big about Ohio? To build the yeshiva in Ohio. Because in Ohio, you had the Buckeyes, yeah. No. You had especially Cleveland and Columbus, and these days were the strongholds in Cincinnati of the Reform movement. The biggest Reform temple was in Cleveland, Silver's Temple, downtown. You had the Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati. That's why Reb Eliezer Silver went to Cincinnati. They said, this is where the biggest tumah is in America. And that's where we have to build the yeshiva. And when they built the yeshiva, they had a handful of boys, and nobody was really interested in learning Torah. So the story, we'll end with this, because we have to end early today, with Rav Bloch was, he was in a bookstore in New York, and he asked for a certain sefer, an advanced sefer. I forgot what it was. I think it was the Ketsos, the Shev Shmaitza. Name of a sefer, very deep, complicated Torah book. So he asked the bookstore seller, do you have a copy of this? So he said, I'll have to look way in the back. We don't sell these books anymore. There's no need for them. He finally blows the dust off of it and says, here, this is the last Shev Shmaitza probably in America. It'll be the last one we're ever going to sell, because nobody needs them anymore. Rabbi Meir Bloch says it's not going to be that way. Okay? So now, when was the greatest Torah learning happening? When you're tipping the scale. When you're going to a place where Torah has been finished, and say we're going to start over. And what heroism took to say, no, there's going to be a day where in Cleveland, Ohio, instead of Silver's Temple, there's going to be hundreds of yeshiva bachrim learning Torah, which was unheard of in Cleveland. And was unheard of really in many parts of New York as well, as we all know. And all these people came back, and the different Rebbes came back with the Sheres HaPleita, and they brought back Torah. Or the story, so many stories. Rav Kahneman in Bnei Brak, he says, here we're going to build the biggest yeshiva. They thought he was crazy. So here we're going to build the biggest yeshiva. And they said, he went nuts. He went nuts. Hitler's ready to destroy us. And he's going to build a yeshiva over here? And Taki, you see in Bnei Brak what it is. So that Adarabah was the biggest Torah is when you tip the scale. Now it's easy to learn Torah. You got all the places built. But where's the courage to build those places when everything was destroyed? So that was the biggest Milchama Shel Torah. To replant it, especially in North America, to replant it in Eretz Yisrael the way it should be. That was talking the biggest thing. So that's why Hashem did miracles. Because there was miracles in Torah. The fact that Torah, everybody said in the 1900s, you come to America, America's treif. When you go to America, you will not become Jewish. And to transform it that every city that has 5,000 Jewish people would have a day school in it was nothing less than the biggest war that was ever fought for Torah. But it was to begin those wars. That's the hardest part.